Morning School of Tomorrow. I just restarted this video because I got messed up on communicating what an orthoscheme is, which is a tetrahedron where you can make, as you trace along one of the three vector zigzags, there's always like two zigzags makes a tetrahedron, six edges. If you can turn right, make a right turn consecutively twice, then you've got what's called an orthoscheme. And six of those make what we call, well, you can make a cube out of six orthoschemes. So I had gotten that far in my presentation, and I'm going to start there and go backwards, because that's where I messed up. Here's my orthoschemes. It's already, well-known, well-established kind of Wikipedia, encyclopedia kind of knowledge that six orthoschemes can make a cube, and here I make six orthoschemes, take their picture, and assemble them step by step into a cube. Except in our paradigm, this cube being made from 24 mites, and these are mites individually spread out here that I used to make the orthoscheme. Those have volume 1/8, so the cube is 3, and the orthoscheme being made of 4 mites is 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8, right? So what's that? 1/6 of a third of 3. 1/6 of 3 is 1/2. 4/8. So that's the kind of thing we do on this channel. I know that sounds kind of boring, but in reverse, I would be very bored at any university or college where no one else on the faculty had ever developed any interest in the Bucky stuff, which is what I specialize in here. And I include ZomeTool. And there's the famous Russell Chu passing through, checking my synergetics writings and so on, right? So we go back and drinking buddies here. So in my local place, I'm, still exploring. There's the city's changing around me, so when I think I know things, I go back and it's all new. Like I just got out to this Bethany village. I don't think I've ever set foot in the place, and it's really an interesting location with so many storefront slash schools. The schools are like library, but also quite a few schools, and I'm teaching at one of them actually for the moment. Not today though, it's President's Day. Normally I'd be out there right now, but we're having a holiday. And in Facebook here, I wrote a little essay. Today is President's Day. And I take it seriously, secularism. I notice the Dalai Lama does too. Let me just read an excerpt. For me, it means a practical janitorial service that keeps the theme park ship shape. The theme park ship shape. People mostly come here to have fun, and part of that is dressing up in silly bodies and believing stuff. Secularists don't want bloody battles based on aesthetic choices. The world is big enough to sequester the freaks, but it's a management undertaking. And I go on from there. In the back of my head, I'm kind of thinking about H.G. Wells. We looked at his fiction and nonfiction in our Martian math course, which, as you remember, is based a lot in Python computer programming. The language is Python, but it doesn't have to be. And a lot of people out there, like on Quora here today, I've been, sort of stirring things up, as I have been on Facebook, stirring things up. Because I think, as a secularist, I do want public debate because all of our concepts continually need to be updated. It's not like everything has meaning because the world is this static place where everything is the name of something, like a stone or a rock. And as long as the stones or rocks don't change, then we know what we mean by things like capitalism, communism, right? All these things. So here I'm stirring it up with one of Tucker's rants and a critique thereon, where an Asian woman takes Tucker's side, you could say. So there's some interesting dynamics there. But is that a race, Asian? And so I talk a lot about race as a secularist. I don't let that concept just go by without comment. I don't see it as a synonym for ethnicity. I see a lot of mistakes based on sort of outward reading of someone, misreading, and coming to conclusions about ethnicity that are incorrect. We've all seen that. So people kind of mock you if you're colorblind, and I don't claim to be colorblind. I see colors very well. I'm not colorblind, literally or figuratively. But it's what you do with that information and what you deduce from it, and whether you have a lot of faulty logic that might be interested. And speaking of logic, uh, I found bugs last night as I was teaching this Wordle, kind of Wordly implementation, where I've just gotten to the point where I have all the 5-letter words in English coming in from Stanford University. I've just gotten to that point. And I'm not requiring that when you guess that you actually guess an English word. I'm letting the computer take any inputs as long as they're letters and there's 5 of them, this kind of thing. I've kind of loosened the rules for those who play by strict rules, and I don't even know the rules because I have never played Wordle yet, the trademark version, the one that New York Times just bought. So I also talk about Ukraine as we go down here. And as Quaker, I talk about the meaning of nonviolence or violence. So I'm using Facebook. I know they say Facebook is dying and so forth. Everything's dying. I mean, so what, right? I mean, what you do is you work with what you have at the time you live in, right? You wear the clothes, you talk the talk and walk the walk of your time, not of someone else's time necessarily. You can pretend you're in another time, science fiction wise. Back to H.G. Wells. In the back of my mind, I'm thinking of the time machine and the Morlocks versus the Eloi. And I'm thinking of the Morlocks. I uplift the Morlocks. Now, if you haven't read the story, these creatures live underground and they're kind of portrayed as maybe sinister, and the roly-poly Eloi are on the surface. And they're more kind of superficial children in a way. And so there's this interesting dynamic which H.G. Wells is projecting based on, you know, it's political satire is what you should think of it as, kind of like Abbott's Flatland. And if you're reading H.G. Wells, here's where me getting into the Ukraine stuff. If you read H.G. Wells, read his nonfiction, like when he went to New York during the time of, who was it, President Harding, between World War I and II, and they were so keen to not fall back into war. And H.G. Wells is he's your journalist on the ground at that event. He hasn't been in New York City before, I get the feeling. He's very giddy about it. It's really, he wants to run around and look at everything in the U.S. I want to go to Florida. I want to see alligators. He's like, I want to be a tourist. I don't want to do boring prevent war stuff. And a lot of us are that way. We're too giddy with life to want to do boring meetings, right? You can understand that. And part of during this essay is he talks about how people are being so mean to the Russians in this interim between the war. It's like the guy in the room who got the most injuries is also still being maltreated, and it's like, if you have like Korea is the same way. If you've had your country bombed back into the Stone Age, kind of literally, then you need healing. And to have a planet that just teases you for that, somehow I don't have. That's where those are the Eloi doing that. It's not the Morlocks doing that. The Morlocks are not teasing the downtrodden. They're not making fun or mocking that insensitively. Now, mocking we do. And I will end on that. I guess I will mock, I guess, because it's President's Day, let me say, I kind of feel like the Biden family is part of the Ukrainian oligarchy. Going way back, right? Victoria Nuland, all that. It's like, it seemed like the Obama administration tried to jump in the driver's seat. And I take that to be a neocon project, going back to people like Richard Pearl and Wolfowitz and those kind of folks. They kind of percolated up through the establishments in D.C., and now they run D.C. And that's what makes DC a horrible little city. And why we have many other cities who can step up to the plate and have different attitudes. It's a multipolar world. And that means like LA not equals DC, not equals Boulder. I mean, we're a diverse population here. That's for sure. So I guess that's about it for me today. Beautiful tutorial on ZomeTool, right? They got the icosahedron going. Where'd that thing end up? Where's my ZomeTool? Come on, I just had it. Oh, crush. Don't break the ZomeTool. So Paul Hildebrand, who's been in on this from the beginning, he gave us good history. I didn't make this event. I didn't get to it. They recorded it, and I've seen the recording. The recording I don't think is on YouTube yet. If they're not going to share it more widely, who am I to do that, I guess? But sometimes I might do something like that. But in this case, let me just say it was a great tutorial, and it covered pretty much the whole concentric hierarchy. Minus too much talk about the volumes, but we can talk about the volumes separately on other tracks in other schools, really. Like out here in the Silicon Forest, thanks to not just me, but to a bunch of us, there will be some fluency with this Bucky stuff going forward, and therefore our universities will not be so boring. So think about applying to a place out here, right? We've got faculty who are a little more up to date, maybe, than in the East. And by the East, I mean to include DC, because their thinking is Ukrainian or something. They're very much stuck in Europe, right? The West is the Americas, where we wear hats like this. This is the West. DC is still part of the East. And I don't just mean the East Coast. I mean, when we talk about Western civilization, read The Dawn of Everything, right? The West has its own identity, and it doesn't necessarily trace to Ukraine or Russia or any of that, right? I mean, these countries didn't exist until recently. Any of them, right? And going forward, do you think they're going to exist in 1,000 years? How about 10? Do they still exist today? Deep questions. Takes some thought. I do say I consider myself a teacher, and I do use my social media to do a little bit deeper debate, but then I make it trivial again sometimes by focusing on stupid stuff and aesthetically cool stuff, though. So, not my Facebook friend, doesn't matter. A lot of people like me out there. Find your own nerd and learn to talk nerd. It's more like I talk geek, but they're very closely related. So, and my channel is very much Bucky stuff because that's interesting to me, and I'm bored by all the channels that don't have this, so I have to make my own content. A lot of you know what I'm talking about. We're a critical mass by now. Anyway, great ZomeTool talk. Learned a lot, even if I couldn't be there. See you guys next time, maybe.